Good morning. The lecture today will be about an important subject, which is the melanin. The objective of this lecture is to discuss the function of the melanin and the types, the biosynthesis of the melanin, and what are the important enzyme and protein that's involved in the synthesis of the melanin, and we will discuss the disorder that result from deficiency of any of these proteins that may affect the melanin quality or quantity. In addition, we will talk about another protein, which is keratin, and we will define its main character and function. The first part of the lecture will be about the melanin. Melanin is an pigment found in the human hair, skin, and other part, and it related to a group of molecules that have many functions in the body, but the most important function is the pigmentation, in addition to photoprotection. The base of the name melanin returns to the ancient Greek word called melanos, which means dark. Our skin color is determined by 3 or 4 factors. The most important one is the type and the amount of the melanin. It gives the brown color and its derivative, and depend on the also the amount of the oxyhemoglobin, which gives the red coloration, the reduced hemoglobin, the blue color, and the carotenoids, which is responsible for the yellowish color. Of all of these, the most important is the melanin. So it is the main pigment in the human skin, hair, and eye, and the main pigmentary molecule. Basically, the majority have the color of is dark, either black to brown, but other melanin may be present, which give a reddish or yellowish pigmentation. We can classify the melanin that is produced by the melanocyte into 3 main types. We have the eomelanin, which composed of 2 types, the dark brown and the black, and usually they are found in the dark skin and in the black hair. And we have the third pigment, melanin pigment, is the pheomelanin, which is responsible for the light yellow or red pigment, and these are found in Caucasian and responsible for the red hair and the freckles phenotype. We can see in this picture the tadrij of the pheomelanin from yellow to red in color. This coloration, the pigment that is responsible for, is the pheomelanin, while the eomelanin is responsible for the dark brown to black pigment or color. The last row is the color that is produced by the eomelanin. The 3 types of melanin are usually found in the human skin, but the distribution, the quantity differ. Sometimes we hear about another molecule called neuromelanin. This is found only in the brain center, certain part of the brain, mainly in the substantia nigra, and it is usually the breakdown product of catecholamine metabolism, mainly of dopamine. Usually, the number of the melanocytes doesn't change very much between one individual and another, but the distribution may differ in the same person and in the so that at different sites of the body they have different distribution. For example, the palm contain a small amount of melanocyte. The sole also contains small amount of the melanocyte. Also the melanocytes, that are the cell that produce the melanin, have a certain or unique structure inside it. It is called the melanosome. So the melanosome are certain organelle found inside the melanocyte. It is the site where the melanin is synthesized and stored. After they are synthesized and stored in the melanosome, the melanosome are transported to the nearby keratinocyte to give the special pigment to that cell. In addition to the role of melanin as a pigment, it have also a protective role, so that it is its position above the nucleus. It forms as a cap to protect or shield the DNA from the UV radiation. So, in addition to the pigmentary role of the melanin, it is because of its position, the melanosomes found in the supranuclear position of the cell, يعني موجودة above the nucleus, so that it can protect the DNA from the UV radiation. The primary stimulus for melanin production is the exposure to UV radiation. The UV radiation, it will stimulate the production of the melanocyte stimulating hormone, and before this step it will stimulate the production of the precursor, which is the pro-opiomelanocortin, and then the melanocyte stimulating hormone will stimulate the production of the melanin. The melanin biosynthesis require a lot of proteins and enzymes, so that more than 25 genes are involved in the control or in the production of the melanin. The first hormone, the first molecule that is involved in the melanin biosynthesis, and it is considered as the precursor for the melanin, is the amino acid tyrosine. Tyrosine is converted by an important enzyme called tyrosine hydroxylase to the DOPA, which is the dihydroxyphenylalanine, and this process is the first step and the rate limiting step in the production of melanin. So the first step is the conversion of the amino acid tyrosine to DOPA dihydroxyphenylalanine by the enzyme tyrosine hydroxylase, and this step requires also a cofactor, which is the tetrahydrobiotin. After that, by the enzyme also tyrosinase, the DOPA, the dihydroxyphenylalanine, is converted to another compound, which is the dihydroxy dopa-guanine, and then it will converted by subsequent steps either to eomelanin or to the pheomelanin. So this is the diagram that shows that the tyrosine is the first compound that is involved in the melanin biosynthesis. By the enzyme tyrosinase, it converted to L-DOPA. Then by the enzyme again tyrosinase, it is converted to the dopa-guanine and then to melanin. Then by subsequent steps, either it's converted to eomelanin or pheomelanin. So this is another illustration. This is tyrosine and this is the DOPA, then dopa-guanine. This will follow different pathway, and eventually either it will form the pheomelanin, which is mainly found in Caucasian, skin color, and the color will be yellow to red pigment, or it follow another pathway and it will give the eomelanin, which is found in the black and in Asian skin color, and it will give the brown black pigment. The UV light is the first step that allow the beginning of the process of the melanin biosynthesis, and the process or the reaction between the UV radiation and melanin is complex. People who live in the equator, يعني قرب خط الاستواء, they have a great proportion of the eomelanin, which give them the dark brown pigment, and this allow them to be protected against the skin cancer. Usually it have a UV absorbent character, it have an antioxidant property, and also it acts as scavenger for free radical. This is because of the effect or the interaction between the UV and the melanin. Why? People who live away from the equator are rich in the pheomelanin, which give them a yellow-red color to the skin, and unfortunately this will produce free radicals when there is exposure to excessive UV radiation, make them more prone to develop cancer, skin cancer. As we said, more than 25 genes are involved in the melanin biosynthesis, so that there are a lot of protein and enzyme that are involved in the production of the melanin. We talk about the tyrosinase, which is the enzyme that converts the tyrosine to the DOPA, then dopaquinine, and mutation of the gene that is responsible for tyrosinase will give us a special syndrome that is called albinism. And also we have another important protein, it is called tyrosinase related protein. It controls the transport of the or the trafficking of tyrosinase to the melanosomes. We have the enzyme that is called DOPA tautomerase, and it is responsible for the detoxification inside the melanosomes, which are the site for the synthesis and the storage of the melanin that is produced. So the enzyme DOPA tautomerase is responsible for the detoxification inside the melanosome, which is the site for the production of the melanin and the storage for melanin, and it is found usually as a membrane-bound organelle in the melanocyte, and later on it will be transported to the keratinocytes and give the color. So if there is mutation in the tyrosinase or in the tautomerase or in the tyrosinase related protein that control the trafficking, all these will lead to abnormality in the pigmentation. Either there will be decrease in the quantity or the quality of the melanin that is produced. The disorder عادة هيكون hypopigmentary disorder, which means that there is decrease in the pigmentation. Other, for example, we have transporter. So if we have a defect in the transporter of the melanin, or in the cysteine or tyrosine transporter, or in the protein that regulate the pH inside the melanosomes, or in the proton pumps inside the melanosomes that are involved in the production of the melanin, all these lead to a pigmentary disorder. So we have the tyrosinase, we have the tyrosinase related protein, we have the tautomerase enzyme, we have the transporter, could be tyrosine or cysteine transporter to inside the melanosome, we have the protein that regulate the pH, we have the proton pumps. All these, any abnormality or mutation in the gene that control this protein may lead to a pigmentary disorder. The different amount or proportion of the melanin will determine the color of the hair, also not only the skin. For example, dark black hair usually contain mainly black eomelanin. Brown hair, mainly it is due to the brown eomelanin. We have two types of eomelanin. We have the brown and the black. Generally, the black and brown hair result from black and the brown eomelanin. While the people with blonde hair, الأشقر, usually they have no black eomelanin and small amount of the brown. Blonde, الأشقر, have little amount of the brown eomelanin and they have no black eomelanin. The red hair usually contain equal amount of the both the pheomelanin المسؤول عن yellow red and in addition to the eomelanin could be black or brown. So if they are found in equal quantity, both the pheomelanin and the eomelanin, the result will be red hair. The function of the melanin is not only for the pigmentation of the skin and hair, but also it have another function. The main thing is the photoprotection of the skin and the eye, and also they have antibacterial effect. They have immune modulatory effect. They can play an important role in the immune function. The melanin protect the skin from the UV light induced damage, and for both the skin and the eye. People who have a green eye or blue eye or gray eye usually have more sun-related disease in the eye, so it have protection of the both skin and eye from the UV damage. كل ما كان أكثر الإيوميلانين it have a more protective effect against the UV radiation. The pigmentation or the color of the skin depend on what? The number of the melanocyte in that part of the body and the expression of the gene that control the melanin biosynthesis, transport, trafficking, detoxification effect. The expression of this gene and the product of this protein, whether they are enzyme or structural protein, all will play a role in the pigmentation in that person. Also, the amount of the pigment or the type of the pigment of both the eomelanin and the pheomelanin. The relative ratio of the eomelanin and the pheomelanin also play important role. And sometimes all of the synthetic steps are normal, but there is defect in the transport of the melanin from the melanosome to the keratinocytes. Also, the distribution of the melanin in the basal layer of the skin. All these will depend, the pigmentation depend on all these factors: the number of the melanocyte, the genetic expression of the protein and the enzyme responsible for the melanin biosynthesis transport, and how much the different type of the melanin, whether the eomelanin is synthesized more or the pheomelanin, the transport of the melanocyte, melanin from the melanocyte to the melanosome, then to the keratinocytes, and also the distribution in the skin. Many diseases may result from mutation that affect the gene that is responsible for the production of the protein or the enzyme that are involved, whether in the biosynthesis of melanin or the transport of the melanin. The most popular or well-known disease are the albinism and the phenylketonuria. The albinism, usually it is due to the defect in the or mutation in the gene that is responsible for the production of the tyrosinase. We know that the tyrosinase is a key enzyme involved in the two most important steps in the production of the melanin, which is the conversion of the tyrosine to dopa, then from dopa to dopaquinine. So if we have mutation in this enzyme, usually it is an autosomal recessive disorder, it will result in a hypopigmentary disorder. There will be blonde with an ocular manifestation. Usually they have very light blue eye, eyes تكون blue. Sometimes they have a pink iris with it, pink iris, and pink pupil, because there is a defect or lack of pigmentation inside the back of the eye. So it's an autosomal albinism, is an autosomal recessive disorder. It is one of the disease that result from mutation in the tyrosinase enzyme, which is a key enzyme in the melanogenesis, and there will be hypopigmentation of the skin and the hair and ocular problem with a blue eye and a pinkish iris and a pink pupil. The other disorder that result in a fair skin is the phenylketonuria. It is an genetic disorder inherited as an autosomal recessive disease. There will be deficiency in the enzyme phenylalanine hydroxylase enzyme. This enzyme is required for the conversion of the amino acid phenylalanine to a tyrosine. So there will be a decrease in the tyrosine. Also the pigmentary change due to competitive inhibition of the tyrosine by the excessive amount of the phenylalanine. يعني احنا نحتاج الفينيلاlanine hydroxylase to convert the amino acid phenylalanine to tyrosine, as we know tyrosine هو the precursor for the production of the melanin. So the enzyme that convert the phenylalanine to tyrosine will be decreased in this disorder. In addition, the excessive amount of phenylalanine, because it is not converted to tyrosine, will inhibit the enzyme tyrosinase. And because the enzyme is inhibited and tyrosine may be not available in large quantity, then this will lead to that the conversion of the tyrosine to melanin by the enzyme tyrosinase. These steps will be inhibited. So because there is no melanin, the patient will have a fair skin, in addition to a more abnormality that is caused by the accumulation of the phenylalanine. For example, the patient may have a musty odor of the urine, which is unpleasant odor. Fair skin, there will be abnormal ECG and mental retardation, in addition to his blonde hair, blue eye, and other skin change. The other protein that is very important in the skin is the keratin. It is a structural protein. The main two types is the alpha helix and the beta plated sheets. Usually the keratin is arranged as a keratin filament and found in the hair, in the nail, and in the outermost layer of the skin. So it is found in the hair, in the nail, and in the outer layer of the skin, and it have important structural function mainly. In addition, it have another protective and other function that we will talk about. The composition of the keratin is mainly the small amino acid that like alanine and glycine, and being composed of each small amino acid, this will make the alignment to each other are easy, and they will form later on bonds between them. In addition to having this small amino acid, the most unique feature of the keratin protein is that it contains a large amount of the amino acid cysteine. So this is a characteristic feature, and having a large amount of cysteine, it will form the disulfide bridge between these protein or the keratin filament, forming a strong protein that can maintain or allow it to perform its main function. Other characteristic or property of the keratin is that it is a strong protein. It resists digestion by the proteolytic enzyme, by pepsin, by trypsin, and when we put it in a diluted acid, it will be insoluble. If we put it in alkaline, also it is insoluble in water and organic solvent. It could be soluble or in certain solution, for example, that contain a denaturing agent because it is protein, for example, the urea. In the living layer of the epidermis, we have the keratin arranged in a certain filament forming protein, and it is called a pre-keratin or cytokeratin. Keratin have both mechanical and non-mechanical function in the body. The most important function, it acts as a scaffold for the tissue where the keratin found in high concentration, example in the hair, the nail, and the outermost layer of the skin. It will help them to sustain the stress, the mechanical stress that's on this tissue. Also, it gives them mechanical resilience. In addition, it maintains the integrity of the tissue because it is a structural protein. It is a strong protein, and it have a water-proofing property, so that it can protect the tissue against the hydrostatic pressure. And also sometimes we can find that the skin is scaly with pressure. The explanation of this appearance is that the cell sometimes became, as part of the life cycle, the skin cell in the outermost layer became fully keratinized, and after death the wall, the remnant of the cell, اللي هي cell wall, around the fully keratinized material تنطينا هذا scaly appearance. Also, the keratin, one of the mechanical function is that it influences the architecture of the tissue by affecting the cell shape. The non-mechanical function of the keratin, it is important in cell signaling. يعني not only it have an importance as a scaffold, or it help the tissue to maintain the mechanical stress that is on the tissue. In addition, it have non-mechanical. It's helpful for the cell transport. It is important for the differentiation of the cell, for the cell signaling. It affects the protein synthesis by transporting certain or changing the architecture, and also it's important in the melanogenesis by it affect the distribution of the melanocyte in the basal layer of the epidermis. So the keratin have mechanical and non-mechanical function, and the non-mechanical function is through the affecting the signaling inside the cell, the transport of material through the cell, the differentiation of the cell, and also it affects the metabolic process. For example, the protein synthesis and cell growth may be regulated by the keratin, and it also helps in the process of the melanogenesis by the distribution of the melanosomes that contain the melanin in the basal layer of the skin, in the epidermis. In summary, melanin is a pigment found in the skin, hair, eye, and other parts of the body. It is responsible for the pigmentation in addition to many other functions as the protection from the UV. We have two main types of melanin. We have the eomelanin and the pheomelanin. The eomelanin have two types, the brown and black, and the pheomelanin. The eomelanin responsible for giving the black-brown color, while the pheomelanin is responsible for giving the yellow-red color, and it's mainly found in the Caucasian. The enzyme tyrosinase, in addition to other protein, are important in the synthesis of the melanin from the amino acid tyrosine. We have other proteins that are important, and a defect in any of these protein or enzyme may lead to a hypopigmentary disorder. The other important structural protein is the keratin, It is found in the hair, skin, and in the superficial layer of the epidermis. It have both mechanical and non-mechanical function. The mechanical function is mainly to give the scaffold for the tissue and resist the mechanical stress. Also, it have a mechanical resilience function, waterproof, and in addition to these mechanical property, we have the non-mechanical function of the keratin. Involve its participation as a part in cell signaling, in cell differentiation, in cell transport. Also, it's important in certain metabolic process in the cell as protein synthesis, and play a very important role in the distribution of the melanosome, which is the molecule or organelle that store the synthesized melanin. So by keratin, the keratin play an important role in the proper distribution of these melanosomes to the basal layer of the epidermis. And thank you.